I mean, where do you start with this guy? I mean, we'll save it for the interview, obviously, but my God, yeah, definitely one up there as one of the biggest names we've had on the show. And we'll let the interview do the talking, but just sit back and enjoy this conversation with a truly marvellous musician and all-round genius, Mr. Thomas Dolby.
So I went to work on that, and I actually wrote Hyperactive, intending that for Michael to sing. I sent it to him, didn't hear anything really, and I finally called him and said, what do you think of that demo I sent? He said, well, I like the drums.
Some nights he's weightless, he has to travel, his mouth is gravel, and there's an empty feeling within his heart. Eye on the fuel gauge, Westchester Thruway, that triple octane won't contain the empty feeling in Dolby's heart. Same old insecurity, strap him into his car seat, and some started leaking all over New Jersey. Gas stations everywhere, not one drop to fill me.
I know Mark mentioned at the beginning, your collaboration list is like a who's who, and it's incredible. And you also produced two of our favourite albums with Prefab Sprout, and I think, is it right that Martin McAloon's supporting you for the UK leg of the tour?
That's right, yeah, which will be great. As I understand it, Martin sort of comes on stage and says, look, I can't really play and I can't really sing, but you can, and launches into like Prefab Sprout's greatest hits and just turns the mic around for the choruses.
Rain on me like no other, until I drown, when love breaks down, the things you do to stop the truth from hurting you.
No, that'd be amazing. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him. And is there anyone that you has escaped the Dolby net from a collaboration perspective?
Well, I've never worked with Eno, which is a shame.
Yeah, that is a shame. That's a great shout.
I mean, not that Eno needs another notch in his belt, but we interestingly, he grew up in Suffolk and moved to Abingdon, and I grew up outside Abingdon and moved to Suffolk. But we've never actually met, which is sort of bizarre. We corresponded a little bit. So he's probably really the only one. I mean, a lot of them, even quite unexpected people. I played at the Wall in Berlin with Roger Waters, and Van Morrison and Joni Mitchell was there as well. Some of the bands were there, So these are all people from, like I said, different genres. I had Jerry Garcia and Bob Weir of the Grateful Dead play on one song. I had Eddie Reader from Fairground Attraction and so on. She's done sort of duets with me. Regina Spektor guested on my last record. I did a thing with Imogen Heap recently, Jason Mraz. So, I sort of reach out to people and just find unusual combinations, really.
Imogen Heap she's really into her music technology as well, with her electronic gloves and everything. She's an amazing artist.
No, she's incredible. I mean, she won a Grammy for sound engineering her own album, which is extraordinary.
Also, Michael Jackson took an interest in your music in the early days.
Briefly, yeah. I mean, Michael was he was a real student of music, and I think he was always looking out for the new thing. And so around about the time of Thriller, he became aware of me, and he liked my record, and he actually thought I was an American bloke, because he'd first heard me in sort of urban clubs. And we had a chance encounter because we both had the same video production company, Limelight Films, and we were actually in adjacent editing suites in Soho, London. He was doing Billie Jean, and I was doing She Blinded Me with Science. and we literally met at the water cooler, which is sort of interesting. He gave me his number, and I had a Filofax. Remember those?
Oh, good.
I wrote his number in my Filofax, an LA number, and about 3 months later, I'd flown into LA because the record was a hit there, and I was terribly sick, and it was pouring with rain, torrential rain, and I didn't like there was like a fleet of limos came to pick me up and take me out in the town, and it's just not my thing. I said, well, I'm going to call a friend. Actually, I've got plans tonight. And they handed me a phone and sort of said, go ahead. And I opened my Filofax, and the only LA number I had happened to be Michael's. And I thought, I picture myself sort of doing one of those things where you pretend to be talking to somebody, But actually, Michael answered, and he said, "Where are you?" And I said, "Where are we?" And he said, "Burbank." Okay. He said, "That's just around the corner. Why don't you drop by?" I'm like, "Really? Okay." So I spent an very interesting evening at Michael's mansion in LA. This was after Thriller, but before it really broke globally. And he was already working on the next album, which was Jackson's album called Liberty, something like that. Anyway, he said, we haven't got all the songs yet. Have you got anything? So I went to work on that, and I actually wrote Hyperactive, intending that for Michael to sing. I sent it to him, didn't hear anything really, and I finally called him and said, what do you think of that demo I sent? He said, well, I like the drums.
Gee, thanks.
I was really proud of the melody. I thought this is something that I thought it was something Michael could have sung when he was 14, And then he said, I'll tell you what, though, can you get me some rag work for my llamas? I said, well, my llamas, that said, in Wales, I know there's a lot of rag work.
Stepping away from music a little bit, I mean, you're like the Homewood Professor of Arts. Is that right, John Hopkins? How did that all happen, buddy?
Well, let's see. My wife is from New York State,
right?
And her dad is quite elderly, and her sister is not very well. And we'd been living in the UK for 7 years while our kids were in high school there. The youngest of them went off to university, so we were able to sort of, pick and choose where we went next. And we decided to be on the East Coast of the USA. I got offered a position at a different university in Boston that didn't really appeal to me, but I was very chuffed that they would think that I was worthy, because I left school at 16 and went and worked in a fruit and veg shop in Notting Hill Gate. And yet I'm from a very academic family, as you said. So I was amazed that they would think that I could do that. But there's a thing in US universities called professors of the practice, where they like to have people from industry that actually have firsthand recent experience in the industry to offset the sort of more academic side of things. So this Boston University offered me the gig, and I didn't want that. I got out a map basically with my wife, and we looked at the East Coast universities and arrived at Johns Hopkins. And I remembered Baltimore because I'd played here and walked around the harbor right here. And I thought, well, that's a really nice place. And they had this new project at Johns Hopkins to open a film and media center. And they said, well, you could teach part-time and you could help us launch the center. I thought, well, it was a 3-year gig. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty interesting. You get 3 months in the summer, and I'd still be able to do my own projects. And that 3 years turned into 10. We're settled in Baltimore. We love it as a city. My wife has her own career here. We have really good friends. I can sail a lot. I'm very into sailing. See,
I can sail. Yeah.
And so we settled, and we have summers back in the UK when the weather's nice. Still have our house in East Anglia, and our 3 kids are in the UK, 1 in Scotland, 2 in England. So it's a really good. It's been a really good sort of new chapter to my career, really.
Sure.
I like the teaching, and I like the fact that, when I was their age, there were no courses like this at university. There was, if there had been, maybe I would have wanted to go, but you couldn't do, experimental film, electronic music. There was nothing like that in England at the time. And there was, also never really had a mentor, and all the stuff I was doing, there was nobody to really advise me. It was sort of school of hard knocks. And
Yep.
I know a lot now that I wish I'd known then. So I think these kids are really lucky that they've got somebody that's been through all of that, especially because the options they got now are like, 1,000-fold.
Sure.
They've got, better, capabilities on their smartphone than I ever had, in all of my equipment, and so many different ways to publish themselves, so many different career paths. And now, artificial intelligence, they could just type in a few prompts and have it generate music for them. But in the midst of all of that, how do you make choices? How do you choose the right tools?
Sure.
How do you deliberately limit your resources so you're forced to be ingenious and inventive and creative? How do you express yourself as an individual when you're on a par with 10,000 other guys all after the same thing? So yeah, it's been a great teaching and learning experience.
I scare myself, and I don't mean lightly. I scare myself, it can get frightening. I scare myself to think what I could do. I scare myself, it's some kind of voodoo, and with that voodoo, I keep thinking of you.
You've got a busy schedule. Do you have time to listen to any new artists or bands?
Not really. I wish,
I'll ask the next question then.
I wish I could say yes.
It's all right.
I mean, occasionally, stuff comes across my desk, as it were, but and I don't really ask for it. I probably should really actually ask, my listeners who they know, who they've discovered that they like.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm not a big consumer of music. Really. I like silence. I don't listen to a lot of music.
So Thomas, your whole musical career and your life, there's always been blurred lines between composition and invention. You've been very tied in with tech and everything. And then when you became a bit disillusioned with the music industry and you started to get involved in tech, and then the Silicon Valley chapter of your life, and Headspace and Beatnik, and inventing the polyphonic ringtone and music onto websites and everything you did there. Reading the chapter in your book, towards the end, when it became really stressful and I could feel my chest tightening, because it felt like very claustrophobic. But what you've achieved is absolutely phenomenal, to go from the music career into Silicon Valley and to invent or be part of those things. Was that an easy transition for you, or was you literally just taking tiny steps and feeling your way through it?
I don't think the steps were tiny. It would have been a lot easier to just, while I was just in the music industry, I had 2 or 3 different careers, right? Performer, songwriter, producer, film composer. I could have just picked one of those and focused on it a little bit. It would have made a lot of people very happy. If I could just have had some focus and not constantly get distracted by the new thing. But I mean, at the end of the 80s, I did find myself disillusioned, and I found that the industry was changing. I think that, the record industry was getting more and more desperate and trying to sort of regurgitate, their past catalogs of CDs and other formats. And then the internet came along, and suddenly they were torpedoed their whole sort of oligarchy, basically, because you could download stuff, and it took away their ability to have everything locked in. So they kind of went into panic mode, and they tightened up on everything. And I saw with artists that were signed to labels that they no longer had any sort of freedom or autonomy. They were forced into a mold, into following a format dictated by the marketing guys. And I thought, well, this is going to be absolute death for me, because I have to be able to branch out and go in different directions. Simultaneously, the tech world was fascinating. I'd started the 80s with $100,000 worth of Fairlight that only 6 guys in the country had. By the end of the 80s, I was on a little Mac that you could go and buy at Radio Shack, with a couple $100 worth of software that could basically give you a recording studio, good enough to make albums at home. That had happened during the course of a decade. And yet the way that it was going, the technologists sometimes get ahead of themselves, and they don't really know artistically what the use is going to be for their inventions, but they just do it anyway. So it's really up to the artists to grasp a new technology and show the world what it's there for, what the capabilities are. And that to me is the most exciting place to be, where, I'll see the possibilities of a new technology and find a way to weave it into my music and express myself with it.
When the world was still a baby, but instincts and equation, you could program in an android. Brush up on my field work, gonna brush up on my field work, gonna get my fingers dirty.
Increasingly in the 80s, I was doing that, but I had close, being in California, I was living in LA at that point, I was close enough to the companies making this stuff. Sure. And I was starting to consult with them. They would ask me to test out their new stuff. I would make suggestions. Sometimes 6 months later, a new rev would come out that had my suggestions in it. And this was all, way too enticing for me. And I thought, okay, that's the way I'm going to go. So I moved to Silicon Valley and got more involved in this stuff and looked for backers to sort of write me a check and allow me to sort of go crazy with ideas of my own.
Because like Fairlight was invented by engineers, wasn't it? There wasn't musicians at all. It was engineers invented this bit of kit, and its musicians adapted it and, used it and played around with it. I mean, we spoke to JJ Jexelik last year, who was, obviously, he was the go-to guy at ZTT with the Fairlight, and he was saying about, that he had two or three seconds worth of sampling power in his Fairlight, and basically he got the gig because he was the only one that.
Okay.
But it's interesting that being at the forefront of tech, and then influencing them by musicians' ideas and being incorporated into the next round of tech is kind of an interesting thing for you.
Yeah, I mean, it was much more exciting than trying to feed off the dregs of the music industry at that point. And I never thought, well, I'm never going to go back. And music is the most natural medium to me, but I'm also very attracted to media in which I'm just a neophyte, because I love learning new stuff. And I love the fact that when you don't really know your way around, you make mistakes and you fall in love with them. They're unlike stuff made by experts. That's the thing. The way I'd become expert in electronic music, and I wanted to go into a field where I was inexpert, because then I could fall back in love with it again.
Bury me in your sauce, baby. Bury me in your sauce. Smother me in all your hot sauce, woman, now. Till smoke come from your thighs. They call her hot sauce. She's hot and spicy, but twice as nice, although she burned me up.
On the music front, is there any new Thomas Dolby music coming, or?
To be perfectly honest, I don't know if I'm done. I don't know if I'm going to have a sort of a second wind really and come back to it. I've never been a prolific, sort of producer and a generator of new stuff. It's not like there's a vault somewhere of 80 outtake tracks that were never released, like a Prince or someone like that. basically anything I've ever done that was any good is on my album. The 40th anniversary of the Flat Earth, and BMG, who now have my masters, are doing a re-release, and they came to me and asked that question. They said, you know, we can put extra stuff on the special anniversary issue. What have you got? And I said, there isn't anything really. You've got all the tapes. There's nothing else.
And look, as an album on its own, it's still one of my favourite albums of the 80s. It's an absolutely incredible piece of work. We ask every artist this, and I know it's a difficult one, but have you got a Desert Island disc? And I'm guessing with your collective and creative brain, probably not.
Not really. No, I mean, if I was marooned on a desert island, I would find like a coconut shell and a twig and a couple of palm leaves, and I'd figure out a way to make some new sounds. I think, I think that there's no single album that I couldn't live without. If you forced me to name my top 10, I could do that, and I've done that in the past. It's easy enough to sort of look up, and that would include, all the people I've mentioned already. There'd be like Bowie, Lowe, there'd be Van Morrison, Astral Weeks, there'd be Joni Mitchell, Hejira, there'd be probably Dark Side of the Moon, probably things like that, and maybe Trans Europe Express. I mean, I could sort of go on like that. If you just have one box of records, but I couldn't pick a single one out of them.
No, fair answer, my friend. And the only reason I ask is sometimes we get completely thrown. When we ask certain people who have a certain style, and the album we get is completely, but the ones you named, I can kind of totally understand. Makes a lot of sense.
We spoke to Wolfgang Fleur, and we love Kraftwerk, and we was fascinated by the process of how Kraftwerk worked. And I said to Wolfgang, like, you was in the room when these albums were made, like, what was the process? And he went, just ask Cole Bartos. He didn't even want to go there and divulge like what the process was like for Kraftwerk.
I found the North Pole in a field of ice, and in a land of dreams I found you. I live in a suitcase.
Thomas, you love your tech. All your equipment that you had or have, or did you keep it all? Is it all somewhere, or did you get rid of it like most of us?
Well, I mean, I don't use racks of hardware synths anymore. I don't have a particular affection for them. It's easier for me to open up a virtual version of them, and then when I'm done, I hit save and close it. Whereas with the rack of gear, somebody trips over a chord, or the cleaning ladies come in and all the knobs have moved or whatever. I've never really, I mean, I've occasionally sort of sold stuff on eBay or given stuff away. I still have my Lifeboat studio in Suffolk, which, and in storage there, I've got some bits and pieces. I mean, I've lost a lot of stuff over the years. For about, I don't know, 10, 12 years, I kept stuff in a cage at John Henry's in Islington or wherever it is.
Yeah.
The Dolby cage, locked up. I was paying rent on it. And finally I thought, I'll go back there and get my Roland JP8 out and work with that. Went back and it's like, oh no, the gate was smashed in 3 years ago, mate. We didn't know how to get in touch with you. Well, I'm paying a damn rent,
Exactly.
Yeah, I lost some quite good stuff. And I lost it actually at the peak time when, some of my old Roland synths probably cost $2,000 new, were worth about 350 quid, in the mid to late 80s. And by 1992, they were back up to $3,000 or $4,000 again, So that was about the period when my cage got broken into and I lost a bunch of stuff. I don't have that sort of love affair with hardware that some musicians have.
Got it.
I think we all did the same. I mean, when digital came out, I sold all my analog synths, and then, like you say, the price, like for Jupiter 8s now or Jupiter 6, or it's just ridiculous.
Interestingly, I did a thing for Roland at the NAMM show a few years ago, and they asked me if I could recreate some stuff with, so I did a lot of stuff with the Jupiter 4, which was before the Jupiter 8. And they located one in LA, one of each. And they had them set up for me there. And interestingly enough, my hands, after probably 20, 25 years, my hands knew where to go to find the right knobs. A lot of sort of modules and things that have a little LED window and you've got to flip through the menus to get there. It's like if you're away from them for 2 months, you've forgotten how the damn thing works. Yeah. You've got to get out the impenetrable Yamaha manual and read, find the right chapter. But these hardware synths, that there's something about the muscle memory of those knobs and everything that just comes very easily.
It's just that tactile process of finding a sound rather than going through a spreadsheet to pick one and move on to the next one. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
And I like, if you come see my live show, I've got a lot going on. Somebody remarked it's like watching somebody land a jumbo jet, while singing there. So it's all MIDI controllers. There's nothing generating sound except the laptop, but I've got a lot of knobs and pads and keyboard octaves available to me. And my I could obviously arrange my ergonomics for the live things a bunch of different ways, but the way I do it is what's fun, so there's a certain patterns that you fall into where got a mic here, you got to stay close to the mic, but there's certain things that I can reach for at different points that just feel really good to play once I've got them dialed into muscle memory. And then I'll leave myself places where I can just hit loop and I can grab the mic and run down the front and do something off the cuff and get back out of loop, finish the song and stuff like that. So I do a lot of looping and layering at the beginning of songs, and I put it up on a screen so people can see me actually inputting the notes.
Your studio up in Suffolk is not too far from us, actually. We're in Essex, we're not too far away, but it was very environmental back in the day. I mean, wind power, and your studio runs on renewable sources and everything. I mean, even Venice in Peril, the name of your label, I guess is kind of quite a green facing name for a label. It's an important part of your DNA, I guess.
I think it is. And I think, again, I think artists have a unique role. I've never been that political or activist or anything like that. But, I think that if you can inject something into the sort of artistic continuum, that has an effect, I think that's great. And so I think when I did Wind Power, nobody really knew what I was on about. But I still have people come up to me. I mean, I got asked by like a renewable energy convention to go and play that song the other day. And I thought, God, unless you're all over 60, you're not going to remember that song. So, oh, no, it's like it's a real meme, and there were sort of 20-somethings and 30-somethings coming out and going, oh, I've always loved that song, Wind Power. And I'm amazed.
But look, we are really looking forward to seeing you in London. We just wish you massive luck with the tour.
Before that, I'm starting, it's actually an amazingly good routing. So it's Glasgow, Newcastle, Manchester, Wolverhampton, Brighton, London. Those are my 6 UK gigs. And they're not consecutive nights, but they start about, you can see on my website, it starts about, I think, the 14th of August. The one in Ostend and then back to the US.
Yeah.
And 2 days later, I start my teaching term again back at Johns Hopkins. So it's
oh, rest for you, Mr. Dolby.
And
You're doing some dates with Tom Bailey as well, aren't you?
Yeah, so the American tour is called Totally Tubular, and yeah, Tom and I are going to be, and I have some history with him. I played on, In the Name of Love, and Matthew Seligman was his bass player for a long time, and so I've known Tom for years.
Okay, my final question before we just have a couple of words on West Ham. This album here, I don't know if it's true, but proper audiophiles use this album to test record decks and amps and speakers. Have you heard that story?
Yeah, I know that, and front of house engineers use it to test their PA systems and things.
Wow!
All right, okay.
Sonic perfection,
especially pulp culture.
Yeah,
and a lot of them when they meet me, they say, "How'd you get that snare sound on pulp culture?" I go, yeah. Lean forward, go. We got a snare. I think it was a Ludwig 19-inch. Yeah. So we put it on a stand. Yeah. Got an SM57 mic on a stand. Yeah. Hit it a few times. Yeah. Pick the best one and just put it on the offbeats all the way through the song. We're going, and that's it. That's absolutely it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Absolutely brilliant.
She thinks the fighting in Central America's easily solved. But what to wear to ballet premieres is a problem she could never resolve. She's an airhead, stun gun and mace, come and get plates, say lost in space.
Thomas, thank you very much for your time. We really do appreciate it. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Okay, guys. Nice talking to you.
Thank you. And yeah, really appreciate it. So how did you become a Hammers fan?
1966, I was 8 years old. My elder brother was a Spurs fan, didn't want to support the same team.
Good for you.
World Cup final, Jeff Hurst, Martin Peters and Bobby Moore. Been a Hammers fan ever since, basically. There's a big chunk in the middle of my life where I wasn't paying much attention, sort of DeCanio era. I was too busy with other things. And then I got back into it probably, sort of 15 years ago. Interestingly, about 500 yards from where I live, there's a West Ham bar. It's the Baltimore.
I love that.
And I would start to go in there because, at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning our time, if it wasn't on a cable channel here, I'd go down there, and they're all down there doing shots. And every time we scored, they'd be going, "I'm forever blowing bubbles." And I would get up there, they sang it terrible. And one day I got up there in the bar, I said, "Listen, you wankers, you're never getting in East London if you sing it like that." Said, "What?" And they figured out, who I was and what I did, and that I've been a fan since 1966. And after that, it deferred to me on all points of honor. Although actually, to do them justice, they know their stuff. They know the history. The lineups, they know the tactics, they know a lot of the history, they know all the stats. They're very into that. Don't always cheer in the right places, as far as I'm concerned. They get angry about things and mouth off about substitutions, or on a bad day, David Moyes is the devil and all the rest of it. But interestingly, they came and consulted me about a scarf that they were having printed. So there's a brewery in Baltimore that makes a beer called Natty Boh, B-O-H. So they come up to me and they show me this scarf, and it says "Forever Bow in Bubbles." And I gave it the thumbs up. And I sent one to my mate who has a season ticket, and he took a selfie of him and a group holding up this odds Baltimore West Ham scarf.
Love that. Yeah.
I take it you haven't taken your brother to the West Ham bar.
I don't know if I think he's into American football now. Actually, he lives in Oregon.
All right.
Sure what he's into. I've never really caught that bug. It's like this is a small enough town that when the team's doing well, everybody's happy, you know. And there's Baltimore Ravens in football and Orioles in baseball, and it lifts the whole town.
Sure.
And, I'm slightly sorry I'm not in Suffolk right now, because I'm sure Ipswich has got the same vibe going on there. So I'm very happy for them. When I'm back in England, I do walking football in Ipswich with a bunch of guys from Ipswich, and you have to be over 50. You can't run. You can only touch the ball 3 times, and there's a lot of good banter. And them are West Ham fans, but they're mostly Ipswich fans.
I think the West Ham team have been doing walking football, I think, for the last few weeks.
Well, it looks like the first half today was walking football, but I'm going to have to watch the second half again, because that looked rather good.
Look, I will let you go, buddy, but we hope we do see you at Shepherd's Bush, and honestly, good luck with the tour, and thank you so much. It's been an absolute joy for us.
All right, likewise, guys.
Cheers, Thomas. Thank you.
Tommy, bye-bye.
Some car backfiring. Please don't ask